because you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of the peoples shall plunder you for the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. So he's basically saying Babylon, who has plundered these other kingdoms and has killed their soldiers, killed their people, and their pregnant women and all that. Now it's going to happen to them because everyone's going to get their revenge on Babylon. Okay. So the remnant of the people shall plunder you for the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. Verse 9. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. You have forfeited your life. In other words, God is saying this is the consequences for what you've done. You've forfeited your life. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. Woe to him. See, now these are all woes. These are like curses that God is saying to Babylon. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Behold, is it not from the Lord of hosts that people labor merely for fire, and nations weary themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That's another famous verse. So what God is saying here is that all of you nations, you think that you have so much power, you think that you can do whatever you want, right? You think that you can just conquer whoever you want, murder whoever you want. But then verse 14, it says, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. How does water cover the sea? Like a little bit or a lot or
buckets.
The sea is water, right? So what he's saying is the earth will know who God is. So God is saying everyone will know who I am when I conquer Babylon. When I destroy Babylon, everyone will know who I am.
Technically, everyone in the world knows. So.
And
they said they don't want to believe it.
That was verse 14. So, in other words, all of these nations, they think they're so tough, they think they're so strong, and God just laughs. At the end, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Verse 15, another woe. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. In other words, with violence. They're, stripping them naked probably. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. Okay, so the cup in God's hand. You know what the cup is?
Yeah.
Whenever the Bible talks about the cup in God's hand, it's always referring to one thing. It's the cup of his wrath, God's anger. In other words, when it says the cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, what does that mean? What does it mean when it says the cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you? And the cup is wrath. So if you have to, if God gives you a cup of wrath to drink, what does that mean?
You'll be weeping and gnashing anger.
Well, he's going to destroy you. His wrath, his anger, right?
He's like this. All right, time to put some.
And you don't want to get.
He's like this. He's like this. Time to put some extra poison. Here you go.
Right. So he's forcing them. If God makes someone drink the cup of his wrath, it's a metaphor, right? It's not literal, obviously, but it means that you have no choice. It means you have no choice. It's basically he's giving you a poison drink. You have no choice. If he has singled you out for wrath because of your sins, because of your violence, then he is going to punish you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
The point is you can't escape God.
You can't escape God. That's very, very appropriate to say. Okay, so the cup will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. The violence, verse 17, done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, as will the destruction of the beasts that terrified them. In other words, it looks like the Babylonians killed all the animals. The destruction of the beasts that terrified them. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. What profit is an idol? This is verse 18. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image? A teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Okay, we've talked about this before, right? They make it themselves. They make the idol themselves, and then they praise it, and then they worship it. And they would also do. You guys know what these idol makers would do? You know what they would do? They would carve the idol out of wood or stone or whatever it was made out of. In this case, metal, I guess it says, but they were different materials. When they would make it, Claire, are you listening? When they would make it, then they would do this ceremony after they were finished. They would pretend to, because they didn't actually cut their own hands off, but they would pretend to do it, and then they would say, "This idol," like when when Moses gets mad at Aaron for making the idol, and he said, "What? This idol just popped out of the fire," as in it made itself. Because and people make fun of it because it sounds so ridiculous, but that was actually what they would say. In these ancient cultures, like in the Mesopotamians, and I think the Egyptians, I can't remember, but the Mesopotamians, when they would make their idols, then they would do this ritual. They would do this ceremony where they would pretend, they would declare, "I have not made this idol," right? The God actually made the idol. So they're deliberately deluding themselves, pretending that they haven't actually carved it themselves, because then it would be ridiculous to worship something like that, right? That I just made and I'm going to worship it. But so they believed that the idol actually, they pretended to believe that the idol actually made itself. So they would pretend to cut off their hands, something like that. And then they would say, "Oh, it just popped out of the fire. Look, there it is. Let's worship it." And so here God is saying how ridiculous this is, right?
That's like doing this. Oh, it's an idol. It came out of nowhere.
And you make it, and you believe that the God is coming down and inhabiting that idol.
Look, it's the real idol. We need to worship it. It's a piece of trash. That's what it is.
Okay, so God is saying, so end of verse 18, for its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Verse 19, woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. See, God is showing how ridiculous this is. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So in other words, what has he done here? He's made a comparison, right? Mm-hmm. It's a contrast between God and the idol. The first one has no breath at all, has no power. The idiots, they make them and then they worship them. They pretend that their gods are inhabiting these idols, but they have no breath in them at all. They're inanimate. They're not real. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So it's exactly the opposite. What is he implying there? That the Lord, he's the one with power. He's the one we worship. These other things you don't worship. It's God you revere and worship and praise, and not the idols. So summing up the first two chapters, and then we're going to see Habakkuk's response next time. So here's the summary. Listen carefully. So what was Habakkuk's first complaint again?
That no one, that God wouldn't do anything to
What was his first complaint?
That his place was, they were mean, they were wicked.
Okay, the people around him.
He wanted him to
his
do
own
something.
people. His own people.
Yeah, and he wanted him to do something.
Yes, his own people were wicked.
And he wanted God to do
and
something.
Violent, and he wanted God to do something, right? God, do something. Aren't you watching? What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And God says, well, how does God respond? How does God respond?
I'll bring the Babylonians.
I will send the Babylonians.
Okay, I'm serious now. Yeah? Stop that. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So there's gonna be corpses, and there's gonna be bloody and stabbing and
okay.
blood.
God says
He didn't say that, Asha.
God says, Yes, I have it taken care of, Habakkuk. Don't worry. I will punish the wicked people in your country, and I'm going to bring the Babylonians to do it. A nation and God is even right straight up saying, yeah, they're more wicked. They're horrible. They're horrible people. And then Habakkuk is like, this doesn't make sense. You're a righteous God. How could you do things in this way? How can a righteous God bring about his plans using an even more wicked people? It doesn't make sense. And to us humans it doesn't make sense. Right? It's just like what? Like and at the end, at the beginning of chapter
I would
2,
have just been whatever floats your boat.
at the beginning of chapter 2, God is like or Habakkuk is like, okay, now let's see what you're gonna answer. And he's like, I'll stand here and I'll wait for your answer.
So technically he's mocking him?
No, he just thinks he's made a really good point.
He wants to be right.
And so God says,
He was a treat.
and so God says that he says, don't worry, this will happen and it will happen soon. Be patient and what?
And then blood.
Trust in me. The righteous will live by faith.
Hey, look.
And you're righteous, so trust in me. Right? That's what God is saying. Listen, you're righteous, so trust in me. You have to trust in me because I am God and you don't understand these things. So the righteous shall live by his faith. And then, of course, after that, then he goes on talking about all of the different things that Babylon has done that are wicked, and that God is going to ultimately triumph over the Babylonians by punishing them in the same way as he punishes other wicked people, right? And they're going to have everything done to them that they have done to others. And then it finishes off, the end of chapter 2, it finishes off after saying that he's the one, Chloe, just wait. And so he finishes off by saying,
Sorry.
all of those who trust in idols, are believing a lie. Don't trust in idols. They're inanimate. They're not real. They don't have power. Trust in God. Trust in his plan.
It's like they're worshiping a twig.
Yep. Trust in the Lord. Trust in his plan. Don't trust in idols. Because this is going to be the punishment that God gives to all those who worship idols. Right? So, including at this time, the Babylonians. And so, we don't know exactly when this happens, but this is probably about around 80 years, 90 years, maybe a little bit less, maybe 70 years. Before God destroys Babylon. So Habakkuk was probably dead by then, which is interesting because sometimes God asks us to trust in him even though we may not be around to see it. And it's like, we want to see it. Like, you don't think Habakkuk wanted to see God destroy the Babylonians?
Yeah.
Daniel got to see it. Daniel got to see it firsthand.
Babylonians?
He got to see the
The
destruction of
Babylonians
Babylon.
existed back then?
Wait,
Since
Daniel has
David's
a
time?
book?
Babylonians have been around since the beginning of time, basically.
Wait, is Daniel a book?
They are the Mesopotamians, Chloe. Remember, Mesopotamia is where...
It's forgotten.
Remember,
Daniel?
Chloe, remember, Mesopotamia is where humans began. That's where civilization began. So the Babylonians, that's right where they're from. They've been around since the beginning.
More than Israelites?
Yeah, well, that's where the Israelites come from. Abraham came from Babylon,
Dang.
or from a city close to Babylon.
What about Noah?
Well, Noah came much later, but
Where was he from?
Noah came before. Now I'm thinking Adam and Eve. Noah came before Abraham.
I have a big question. How come in the Bible they only talk about like Israel and like Egypt and stuff like that? How come they don't tell about other countries in the world? I mean, they talk about Malta, but like...
Well, It's because that's where the central part of the story was taking place. So
The whole thing.
that's where the central part of scripture was taking place. So that's why. Because remember, Chloe, that the story the story of the Bible is from beginning to end one story.
Yeah, but they could have said like meanwhile.
It's one
really?
story, and the
Or-
Old Testament, for instance, focuses on the genealogy, all of the people who came in the line of Jesus. That's what the Old Testament focuses on. All the now focuses on many of the characters around them too, but
Jesus is Peruvian. Why they didn't mention Peru?
no, you're reading the wrong book.
Jesus
The wrong Bible.
Now there were people living in Peru at this time. There were people living in Peru at this time. The
Was it called Peru then?
the Chavins were probably around at this time.
Wait, Dad, it was called Peru at that time?
What's
La
that?
cultura.
Was it still called Peru back then? That long?
Peru? No, because they had different. The tribes had different names. The Moches, the Chimus. Well, those came later, but
Who's the author of Esther?
the Caral.
Esther.
What?
But they were probably more modern then.
What is this the author of this book? Why'd you ask?
The
Do
author.
you think
of
there's people in the U.S.?
At that time?
Yeah, but it wasn't like a country yet. It was just like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Depends who you ask. The problem here is that we have very little archaeological remains,
Yeah, I
but
know.
but in Mexico and Peru, there's a lot.
That sucks here. They don't have anything.
Because Caral is the oldest discovered civilization in the Americas, and they say it goes back close to 5,000 years. So that would have been actually much before this, even, which is crazy to think about that. Anyways, so Habacuc. There's a lesson in Habacuc that is universal for all times, and that is we don't understand God's ways. You guys listening?
Yeah.
We don't understand God's ways, but we have to accept them, which can be very frustrating sometimes. We don't get it. But in the end, when you look at it, if you just look at it now, after thousands of years of history, what you see is, every evil nation in history has been taken care of. Right? It's like,
Yep.
God hasn't left anyone unpunished, so he's done it, and it's to us it's kind of weird how he's done it,
And
but he's done it, and it depends who you talk to. I don't believe necessarily that God controls the actions of people like some people believe, but he knows what people are going to do, and he uses their actions to bring about his own purposes, and his purposes never fail. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. So
Yep.
Unless if he changes his mind.
And shows you that he doesn't have favorites.
Does God ever change
Because
his
Israel,
mind in the
his
Bible?
people.
absolutely.
Does God
Yeah.
ever change his mind in the Bible?
Ooh, that depends on who you talk to. I'm not going to get into that now, but that's a great little debate. Does God change his mind? Because there's a few stories in the Old Testament that would
Right.
seem to show that he does, but
Sometimes
it
he's
depends.
straightforward.
But it depends on how you look at it. Like for instance, when
Moses.
not Moses,
Abraham.
Abraham was interceding.
Well, Moses, Abraham.
Right.
Person.
Yep.
And when that's right. And when Moses stops God from destroying his people, which I think he did
Yeah.
twice, right?
Right.
I think he did it
Right.
twice. He stopped them from destroying the people by interceding. So in that case, did he change? Now the debate is, did he change God's mind, or did God know that he was going to do that? Well, I do think God knew that he was going to do that.
Well, but
So
you,
I don't know. I don't know how it works.
but you can see
nobody does exactly.
that. But you also can see how much he loves us. That when we talk to him, his mercy and his love,
Ow.
you know,
Yeah.
make a I don't know, change his mind, but like because his mercy, like a father, you know, a father. I mean, when the children deserve a punishment,
Right.
you know, and I mean, and a father hear the children. No, daddy, no, please forgive me, please don't do that, you know. So what do? You have mercy. It's not always, but
But then there are times when it doesn't matter how much pleading.
Right.
It's like, no, it has to happen.
right, like
And that's what God did. That's what God did
like-
with Judah. He got to a point.
right,
He gave them, you know, under Hezekiah, under Josiah, he gave them time, right?
right.
He,
Yeah, but for what
he
Manasseh,
spared them,
for
but
what
it was just too
Manasseh,
much.
for what Manasseh did, that is why he was like boom, like no more. But I like to see the part that I like to see the part that
Chloe,
that he doesn't have
you guys.
that part where he shows that he doesn't have favoritism. You know, Israel, his people, they receive punishment too, and they deserve it.
And he rejected them.
Right, the other nations were basically ignorant.
And this is
But Israel knew it.
always my argument. When I read the Bible, I find it very clear that God's people, even in the Old Testament, are not the Israelites, not specifically the Israelites. It's only those who are righteous.
Right.
It's only those who obey him, because many Israelites did not obey him, and he killed them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Were those ones-
it's not specifically the Israelites who are his people. It is only those who obey him. Because you had Rahab and Ruth,
Yeah.
who were not Israelites,
Mm-hmm.
but they were righteous, and God accepted them.
Right. Those ones that they were circumcised their hearts.
Yep.
Not physically, but yeah.
All right, good book, and we'll see Habakkuk's conclusion, and Habakkuk's final song in chapter 3, his final poem or song, is actually I don't know.
That was a song?
In chapter 3 that's coming
What are
up.
you going to say?
I don't know if you have this tune in Spanish, but in English it's at least it was a very popular song. We used to sing it in our church.
How is it?
I have to remember that.
Where the wind
No. It's
It sounds like a Christian song, kind of. Not really.
So you say which one?
it's just I know the words, but I can't remember the first line.
Okay, which book are you talking about?
Habakkuk. It's Habakkuk chapter 3 is a very famous
3.
song.
Yeah, were you saying where the wind goes?
No, it's kind of like that.
Okay, but is a
starting-
hymn?
Yeah, starting at verse 17. It's right at the end.
17.
The fig tree should not blossom, nor there be no fruit on the vine. The produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food.
No.
Flock they came
No sé, no sé.
There be no herd in the stalls. Yet will I rejoice in the Lord. Yet will I
I'd
rejoice
rather
in the
just read
Lord.
that.
Do you have that in Spanish?
No, tal vez en la época de mi mamá porque no me acuerdo.
Yeah, it's a little bit older.
Sí,
but-
y bueno, yo también estoy viejita, pero no me acuerdo haber escuchado ese himno. De repente en la época de mi mamá.
I hate that song.
Okay.
Bro.
Okay. Entonces, see you later.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to do it on Saturday
Hey, look.
because Thursday.
So you see this says
Can't do it
anti-dust,
tomorrow.
right?
Can't do it Friday because
Why not? Look.
Friday she's gonna be traveling, so we can't do it with mommy on
Oh,
Friday.
like
But I said anti-dust.
Yeah, so